Addictions impact over 100 million people here in the United States. Over 50 million people suffer from drug and alcohol abuse. 32 million people suffer from food addiction. 24 million people as young men and adults suffer from pornography addiction. And 30 million people suffer from sex addiction. This episode is for those suffering from the crushing weight of addiction, for those who have watched their family members fade into the abyss, and for those who feel like there's no way out. I feel like to understand what addiction is and what it entails, we kind of have to define it first. And we can look at it as a momentary feeling of pleasure in short term, which impacts us negatively long term, which is something that we can't kick right away. And a lot of people look at addiction kind of as problems or inherited disease or as an internal failure. And in my opinion, and from what I actually suffered on my own terms, it was more of an escape from reality. And it was an escape from trauma. It was an escape from unmitigated pain. It was escape from unmet needs. And I think our favorite, Gabor Mate, says it best. It's not always why the addiction, but why the pain, why the suffering that's causing the addiction. And I think a lot of people now today, based off of what I just went over at the beginning, that's almost half the United States is suffering from some sort of addiction. And I mean, your line of work, do you deal with anything like that, or?
I think it's important to tap into as well that addiction doesn't have to occur daily. And addiction, is basically defined as something that impacts, your functioning in all aspects. So work, relationships, yourself, and it doesn't necessarily have to be substance abuse. It could be, like you said, pornography, gambling, being addicted to work. All of these are different areas where, you see addiction fall, and whether that be due to a trauma or due to, I find a lot of people also become addicted because they get that pleasure, component to it. It's a huge problem. And people look at it as a sign of weakness for someone who does it. But, when you really look at addiction, it's something that this person cannot stop.
It's that impulsionary action.
It's defined as a mental illness in the DSM due to the fact of it being a compulsive disorder that cannot be stopped, even though it is basically wrecking their whole entire life.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know, because you being a psychologist, I don't know how you guys define it, and I have my own views on this, and I'm not looking to offend anybody, obviously, but do you consider, or is it considered in the therapeutic field, that addiction is in fact a disease?
Yes.
Okay.
It is viewed as a disease.
Is it a disease?
You're putting me on the spot. No, yeah, I would consider it a disease due to my background. I know not everyone feels that way, but, it does impact the brain circuit, and it does,
Right.
Change that functioning component. So that is why it's looked at as a disease. It's something that people find it difficult to stop engaging in the behavior.
Right.
So that's why it's mainly viewed as a disease. Also, there's genetic components to it as well. So to answer your question, yes. But again, I know not everyone views it like that, and it's okay. But as long as we're working all together to be able to overcome this epidemic and really pinpoint why addiction is happening, I think that that's, the main thing to focus on.
So why is it happening? I mean, again, like something that I said at the beginning, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but again,
I don't know. Are you?
You and I collectively outside of here have spoken one-on-one how many times? Hundreds.
Many.
Yeah, we've both opened up to one another in a way where my suffering with addiction, you did with a certain extent. Why? Where does the addiction stem from? And I think that a lot of people, what they do is they wind up masking an addiction with a Band-Aid. And what I mean by that, and again, I'm not taking this away from anyone that was an ex-alcoholic. My father dealt with alcoholism for a little while. I know a lot of people that suffered with it. I've seen alcoholics be able to go from drinking to the point of oblivion and then never touch a sip of alcohol again. And then I've seen alcoholics go from drinking to the point of oblivion, healing, and then being able to wind up having a drink every so often. So again, I think that there's a component of pain that winds up being overlooked as so many years go on, like that internal struggle of that child that's ignored or something traumatic that winds up happening. And again, people mask themselves in work. They mask themselves in all type. The gym, for example.
Yes, that's a big one too.
The gym is an unspoken taboo addiction that people use for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Like you should not be in the gym for 3 hours a day.
I agree with that.
I'm sorry.
Entirely.
But, and if you are, that there is a problem there.
Where does it come from? Where does the stem of these addictions actually foster and find a home in the person?
I mean, I'm going to start broader and bigger and on the macro level, because this is truly how I feel, and this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very cultural, and I feel like it's our society as a whole. I think that, you know, we are one of the only countries, 1 out of 2 countries that allow for direct-to-consumer market advertising. So this means that all of, you know, these businesses can directly advertise to us and psychologically manipulate us through these certain marketing tactics. So, you know, how I believe is that the way that these substances, the way that, you know, women are sexualized, you know, pornography, you have Playboy, you have back in the 1960s, you know, even how Tylenol was being advertised. Everything is in people's faces to say, oh, okay, did you want to have sex, or do you feel like, you know, you want to be a little scandalous? Go get the Playboy magazine and you see girls half naked. Oh, you have a headache or you're feeling a little bit sick? Okay, so go pop this Tylenol. We have a magic pill for you. So it basically was a tool to be able to allow for people to take the easy way out. And, you know, I just find that the marketing tactics and everything within our culture really pushes people to think that these things are okay and acceptable. And this is where the justification comes in for why they engage in certain behaviors. Look at gambling. I mean, now we have Caesars betting and all of these different sports betting on our phones.
We also have
advertisements for it everywhere. So you have a justification, so you can have a problem, but the whole society is doing it. So how are you going to really sit there and say that you're wrong when everyone else is behind you on it?
Did you know that gambling skyrocketed this election because you could legally vote on this election that took place?
Yeah, it's just
crazy.
You know, and I think that I want to say this very gently because it's very controversial, but I am not a huge fan of Big Pharma. Big Pharma, we are, you know, our country alone has the biggest pharmaceutical market that there is.
We're also the largest consumers.
We are the largest consumers. Just for a little stat, because I told Ian this and couldn't even believe it, between 2000 and 2023, the revenue for Big Pharma was $11.6 trillion with an $8.6 trillion gross profit. The FDA and Big Pharma have a relationship together where they coincide and work hand in hand. So everything that's being pumped into our food and the people who are, you know, approving what's going into our food also works with Big Pharma, which is medicine. And I just feel like everything ties together, and it is a really big money market, and it's to monetize. So
I love everything
to
you
go
just said.
back to what you're saying. Where does addiction stem from? Look at every other country, and I'm not saying addiction isn't there, but we are at a surplus and an all-time high in addiction in so many different areas. And I truly do believe it's this direct-to-consumer market advertisement and the ability for everyone to feel like it's okay because everyone else does it, and there's this justification component to it. And I think later on I'm going to get into kind of how I fell into that loop, but it's there, it's real. Do your research.
So
That's my answer.
So I have a question also, right? So United States is also most dominantly known for its mental health crisis as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so in your opinion, then my question would be, it is cultural per se, and it is kind of the societal norm. If you're sick, take a pill. Don't feel well, take a pill. Sad, take a pill. Anxiety, take a pill. There's a pill for everything now.
Yes.
But do you feel that through that societal kind of norm and the pressing of all these different big pharmas and these outer sources and external sources of power that are constantly in your face, do you feel that there's an underlying issue behind that? So, for example, right, if somebody has a strong will, per se, and let's say they're capable of handling a certain amount of trauma or pain that goes on, normally they wouldn't fall to those, societal kind of pressures. So do you think that under, and again, personal opinion, do you think under the big pharma and all the different outside variables and sources that are constantly in your face pushing, do you still think that it maybe comes down to something internal about what the person has experienced and something that they've ignored and buried down over the years that then allows them to fall into that trap? And I don't want to use the word weakness, but of susceptibility to be able to wind up, being a victim of that.
Yes.
Okay.
So, this isn't to say majority of the people are not going to fall victim to addiction of drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, all of these, different elements that one can. However, there is that certain group of people who are more susceptible to it. And it's basically, there's this threshold that people have. So I say this all the time where people are born, nature versus nurture. You're born with some predispositions, that you could possibly develop a genetic disease. However, your environment influences if you basically develop it. So I look at it as like a cup. So if you're born with that genetic disease, so you're halfway full, right, with water. However, put yourself in an adverse environment or traumatic experiences. Now you're just pouring into that cup and eventually it's going to overflow and bing, there you go. Like there's your addiction or there's your, disease that you might not have developed if it were for certain environmental factors. So yes, some people are more susceptible and some people, unfortunately do fall into that loop of, that addiction and going down that pathway. And, I just want to say something because I had a workshop 2 weeks ago and it just really made me, I have to say what this meme was basically. So it said drug-free America, right?
Uh-huh.
And under it, it said from 0 to 4, they take amoxicillin. From 4 to 12, Ritalin. 12 to 18, appetite suppressants. 18 to 24, amphetamine. 24 to 38, Prozac. So that's what our drug-free America looks like. It's not actually drug-free.
Not at all.
But to us, going back to what I said, there's this justification component to it because all of those drugs are taught to us from a young age that they help and they're good.
So I'm going to say something super controversial,
Yeah.
and it's not intended to. I don't believe that there is a gene for addiction, and I will tell you why. So you have something called, and I hear you on the predisposition of genes. So you have something called epigenetics, where basically,
Yes, I know.
right. So for those that don't know, you can basically trigger point your certain gene codes on and off, based off of your exercise, based off of what you eat, and based off of your mindset. That's a real thing. That's not my spiritual hippy dippy stuff. But I've been to a number of psychologists in my life, and I said, show me the gene, like test for it. You can't test for an actual, there's no actual gene for addiction. It doesn't exist. So, and I feel that what happens is, I'm going to use my parents as an example. I have two of the best parents that I think any son could ever ask for. But growing up, I was told my entire life that I have an addictive gene from the time I was in elementary school. Growing up, I was told that I have ADD and that they gave me the list of all these things that came with ADD, and I fell into this trap of justifying all of my actions and all of the things that I started to partake into, and maybe due to an extent as, you know what, I have that addictive gene, like it's just part of my nature. But I realized as I got older, I can kick any habit that I choose to on a whim. So that addictive gene, to me at least, is non-existent. I think it is a sham in the health industry, and I'm not trying to be in opposition to your standpoint, but I think when we tell people, especially kids from a young age, this is what's wrong with you, you need to be careful of this. As someone who did that, I wound up justifying a lot of my actions in the future, and it led me down a really, really bad path. And like you were going to get into your things, I've been through the whole, all different types of addictions in my life, which stemmed from many different past experiences and pains and traumas that were overlooked.
Can I interject?
Yeah, of course.
I think that what I said before, nature versus nurture, really goes to your point of it's not, oh, my father was an alcoholic, I now have this genetic gene,
right.
I'm going to be, an alcoholic now due to that. I think that nature plays a huge part, and nurture. Wait, I'm sorry. I just totally messed that up.
Switch it, babe.
I'm sorry. I totally messed that up. Nurture plays a huge part in, the development of how you become as an adult. So it's not to say just because, your mother or father has that alcoholic gene per se, that you're going to also be that.
I just want you to specify that.
It's just your environmental components play a huge role just as much as your genetics. It works hand in hand. They coincide. They interlock, however you want to phrase that.
Right.
And that's how you end up, potentially developing those same disorders.
So I want to go back to the question that I asked you before, right? So you have the United States that has the largest mental health crisis in the world.
Yep.
Okay. You have an alarming rate, and we're not going to go into this, but you have an alarming rate of suicide.
Yes.
Okay. By young men, 75% of suicides are done by young men. Okay. Over 85 men take their life a day. So the mental health aspect of what we go through here in the States is taboo, it's unspoken, and I think it's completely overlooked and ignored. So with that pain that people go through, with that internal suffering, with the numbness that they choose to engage in these types of behavior, why do you think they're doing? I mean, I have my own reasonings, okay? Why do you think people are choosing to give themselves a temporary numb from wanting to be with themselves now?
I mean, I think that a lot of people use different substances or activities to escape a pain or run from something, And I believe that it's dependent on the person and what their coping mechanisms are. Like I say all the time, that might be for one, exercising and going for a walk. For another, it could be chugging a bottle of alcohol. So it depends on how people have learned to cope and escape. And, when you're using a substance or when you're addicted to pornography just to get that release, when you're so immersed in work that all you have time to think about is your job and you can't even think about reality and what's really going on. I mean, these are all things that people dive into to not really reconcile the pain and the suffering and the truth behind how they're really feeling.
So how'd you fall into yours?
I think, this is going to be a tough conversation. From a very young age, there was a lot pent up that I never really addressed with anyone. Mm-hmm. I definitely turned to partying and drinking. I would constantly go out. And I never thought that it was an issue because it would just be, Thursday to Sunday or Friday to Sunday. However, within those days, it would be me getting extremely blacked out. It would be me neglecting all of my responsibilities. So I would be missing work or not doing, assignments I had for school, solely focusing on, the external and when the next party was for me to get that high, because Monday to Thursday, I was basically living like a zombie, like emotionless and numb. And I'm sorry, I didn't think so. Oh my gosh, I did not expect to cry.
Me either.
I know, but I never thought that I had a problem because it was something that everyone else was doing. So I would go out Friday and Saturday, and
I really want to wipe your tears.
And since, everyone else was participating with me, it never deemed necessary to stop. However, I would wake up every day hating myself and knowing that what I'm doing isn't benefiting me and it's not something that I want to continue with, but I literally could not. I would engage in the same cycle over and over again, just trying to run from myself because I wasn't happy. I'm sorry.
Keep going.
And I think that, oh my gosh, I'm like shaking. That people need to understand that just because you're not engaging in something 7 days a week doesn't mean that it's not a problem and it's not an addiction. Because I never thought that what I had was an addiction until I looked myself in the mirror and was like, I have a problem. Like, I'm blacking out every time I go out. I'm not going to work. I'm completely neglecting my self-care and myself as a person. And I'm not giving myself what I deserve. Why? And it's because I couldn't face myself and I hated everything about what was going on in my life. And I just had it so pent up that all I knew how to do was just go out and drink because I didn't want to talk about what was going on. I didn't want to let people in on how I was feeling. So that was just my biggest escape. And, like I said before, society makes you feel like, oh, you're sad? Okay, so let's go party. Oh, you're mad? So let's go have a drink. And everywhere you go, alcohol is just advertised and marketed as this thing of joy. And I really fell into that and I still am in that. And it's been so hard for me to stop. And it's a serious, serious struggle, like a serious issue that people do not understand. And I do want to say as well, people who are addicted to things, they understand and they know. So if you're a person in someone's life who you could clearly see is struggling with an addiction, don't badger them and don't sit there and make it about you and say, if you don't change, I'm going to leave you. Or if you're not going to, quit, then you're weak. Because we know that we have a problem. We're fully aware and hate ourselves for it. So personalizing it for your own selfish, component is just not right and it's not fair. And it further isolates that person who's dealing with the addiction to, go in a deeper hole. So it's not okay to be that person. And you have two options as a person who's in a life of someone who has an addiction. You could either stay and let them know I'm going to be here for you and ride the wave and allow for, yourself to be their crutch to fall on, or you could say, listen, this is too much for me. I'm going to have to step on the outskirts. But when you're ready, I love you. I know that, you could do this. I'll be here. But do not be that person who's going to sit there and just constantly shame someone else for a problem that they know that they have.
So let me ask you a question. So you said that you're still struggling.
Yes.
A little bit of this. Why? You're very self-aware.
I am.
And my question to you is, you know what? Let me just say this quick. Not what I was expecting to say, by the way. I love you.
Oh, I love you too.
I adore you. I've gotten to see the type of woman that you are. you and I speak, and there is a certain skill that you have where you can mentally stimulate and emotionally stimulate me to a degree where I feel good about myself. You've chosen a degree where you're going to wind up helping so many people. Like, your mission now is to change the lives of everybody else. I think you'd be able to make such a better impact if, one, you change your own life for the better, but two, I think you need to realize the type of woman that you are, because I think you're an absolute rock star. You break pinky promises, which I don't like, okay? That bothers me. But I think as a human being, I think you're probably one of the most solid, most incredible people that I've ever been fortunate and lucky enough to be around. And I keep my circle very small. I have a hard time understanding, with how much I know about you and how much I see you giving to other people, why you refuse to fill your own cup and give yourself the same assistance and same help that you're so quick to give out to others, especially now that you've already done the hard part, which is to acknowledge the fact that there is an issue. What's preventing you from doing that?
It's been an acknowledgement for a very long time, and I don't know. I mean, I've gotten a lot better, but not. I've gone 7 steps forward and 20 steps back. It's been such a journey, and it's something that, you know, I really work on every day. And, you know, when I fall back into this cycle, I just can't help but hate myself for it, because I know how good my life could be, you know, without this. However, I feel that it's so deeply ingrained in me, and along with society having in your face, you know, you have to go out, you have to drink, and that pressure of, you know, even just going out and everyone else around me doing it, and me feeling like, oh, you want to know what? I can this time have 1 drink and I'll be good. But every time I do that, I end up 4 drinks deep.
There's a cataclysm of events.
And then I'm blacked out again. And it's like, I can't handle it. I just can't. And I keep trying to convince my mind that I can, and I go in this cycle of, okay, I could do it, but I can't. And it's really getting to a place where I am recognizing, and it's coming to fruition, where I know at the end of the day, it's going to be something where I'm going to have to completely cut it, if not forever, for a very long time. But I just developed this pattern of not having any willpower with it, where to kind of undo all of those bad habits has been difficult.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
I don't want you to cry.
I'm not gonna. I think I
Okay.
all my tears came out.
Do you genuinely love yourself?
Oh my God.
I'm asking that because you said 2 times tonight now. You kept saying, I hate myself.
Yeah.
You and I are so big on self-talk.
We are.
Why not? Because that's genuinely that deep-rooted feeling of, now that you've said it twice tonight, okay, that when you go out and you do it, you hate yourself, or when you acknowledge it, you hate yourself. Why not just have compassion and grace with yourself if you make a mistake, rather than looking at yourself like you're some villain and that you're this giant mess up and screw up that has damaged, all these promises that you've made to yourself and pinky promise to other people. Why not just have compassion with yourself and just say, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm going to try and do better. Do you feel that maybe part of the issue, and this was my issue, but maybe part of the issue that people have is that self-hatred when they're in the midst of having, I'm not going to call it a problem. I'm not going to call it an aberration. I'm not going to call it, this terrible thing, just this part of them that's disconnected from self-love. Do you feel that disconnect is really where the problem lies in?
Yes.
Okay. So why not develop the ability then, if you make a mistake, because listen, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Why not develop that self-talk and that narrative and that story that you and I have spoken about, and just rather than looking at yourself and grieve over you making a mistake, just say, you know what, I'm human. This is part of my experience. This is part of the story that I'm writing currently. The roadmap that I'm on is not linear. I'm going to zigzag off of it and make my way back to it. Just you look at it as you just veering off the road for a second. It doesn't mean that you have to be off for a while, because I feel like the more that you zigzag off of it and then you stay at that point and you're constantly telling yourself what a screw up you are, you're never going to be able to make your way fully back to that path where you can move forward. That's why you continuously are doing the 7 forward, 20 back. Why did this turn into a therapy session?
I don't know. It's my therapy session on a Friday. For a while, I did not love myself. I think that I suffered greatly with that. I've had very bad body dysmorphia.
I've been there.
Have had extreme just self-hatred for myself and my life, and I've just wanted so much to be different, that it affects your willpower when you're like that, because it's so easy when you have so much self-hatred and you don't really love yourself to say, you want to know what is one more drink going to do at the end of the day? I'm already at rock bottom. So me doing this is the only time I could feel happy or love myself, you know?
But do you think that wanting things to be so different, again, stems back from the root cause of the problem, which is pain?
Yes. And it was all pain, which is why I engaged in all of this. However, I'm a lot better now. I'm not there anymore. Yeah. And, you know, we've had this conversation off camera where I'm at a place where I am very happy finally, you know, with myself, with my life. I have a really great routine. It's just this really bad habit that I'm trying to break, and I'm not perfect with it. And it's been a roller coaster. But I know that I'll get there, and I firmly believe that I will be there. It's just going to take some time for me. And, you know, I have been having a lot more compassion for myself. And I think it's why I really do love helping others so much, because I know how deep and dark, you know, that pain can be. And I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because I've done so much work in the last 5 years to get to the place that I am, where I no longer can look at myself and say, I don't like you. There's so much that I do love about myself and what I've become. But it's just, you know, it's a learning curve. It takes time. It's not something that, you know, you go wake up tomorrow and be good. You're going to have your ups. You're going to have your downs. You're going to fall. You're going to be, you know, back in your old habits for a week or two and then not for a month. And it's just the process. And you have to kind of learn to love it and enjoy it, you know, not get to your destination, but enjoy the journey of it all, because I find that that's what makes it so beautiful. You falling down so many times and still getting up and saying, you want to know what? I'm not going to let this defeat me, and I'm going to overcome it, and I'm going to stand strong through it all despite having that hiccup, because I'm a human being that's imperfect, and that's okay. And it's okay to have your flaws and your problems, and you know, that's what just makes life so much worth living.
I feel like something you said is super important, that it's not really about the destination. I feel like all too often, you know, I think people are more focused on the end goal rather than how they're going to get there. And most importantly, I think it's also who you become along the way of that journey. And I think that to me is what makes all the difference in the world. It's to understand there's so much humility in understanding that you can just screw up time and time and time and time and time again, but then also have that radical acceptance with the fact like, hey, it's all going to be okay no matter what. And I think as long as you have that mind, for anybody, anyone that's dealing with it, I mean, we don't need to go too deep into my stuff, but
you should.
I don't need to.
Well, I've said a lot.
I think my tears were already all done. I don't think I would cry if I went into it. But like, listen, I was a big steroid addict for a long time, 8 years. And for those that really don't know much about steroids, when you're taking thousands of milligrams a week, that's a lot. That's a lot. And the thing is you know it's bad when you're looking at a needle filled with poison and you're contemplating why you're doing it, but you can't stop yourself. Yeah. And I tried to stop myself throughout those 8 years. I did. I would come off for a month, and then you get the mental effects, you get the physical effects, you get the body literally craves that rush again from when you're injecting yourself and how you feel when you're doing all these physical activities. But what I learned during that process was all the times that I tried to stop, all the times that I convinced myself this is my last shot, no matter what I do, and then I throw it all out, and then a week later I'm spending $800 and buying a whole new cycle again.
It's a cycle. It's a cycle that's so hard to break.
It reminded me, and it took me a while to get to that point, but it reminded me that no matter how many times I fail at giving up, at being true to my word and to myself, as long as you don't give up on yourself in the end, there's going to be light at the end of that tunnel. I mean, even through... I just got emotional. Oh, my God.
Get emotional. I did.
Oh, man. Again, to further my point, when you look at a lot of these things, so for me as an example, my addictions all came from when I was a child. It was all pain. And going back into our last episode, my body was in that constant state of fight or flight my entire life. Yeah. Going back into third grade, there were rumors spread about me. I had a very abusive third grade teacher. I was pissing my bed every night. I wasn't sleeping. I was in therapy. And you're going to school and you're having these feelings of anxiety and angst. So your body's on that constant fight or flight mode. So I'm constantly dysregulated. Sixth grade, same thing. Ninth grade, I went through all of the physical, emotional, mental, sexual assault stuff. And then once that happened, that's kind of what teetered me over, and my body never deregulated itself. So the only way that I knew how to feel better in the moment was to very temporarily just kind of escape from reality and drown myself in any external sort of gratification. So mine became, once I graduated high school, the steroids, because I couldn't get over the fact that I was bullied. I couldn't get over the fact that I was assaulted. I couldn't get over the fact that people did what they did to me. I couldn't get over the fact that I got stabbed. I couldn't get over any of this. So once I developed the addiction for the steroids, it didn't stop there, you know, because now when I'm home and I'm dealing with myself and I have nothing to do, now I'm angry and I'm excited and I'm anxious. So how do I then deter myself from that? Well, then I found sex. And you wind up, because you're in this community, and I'm not going to speak disparagingly about the bodybuilding community as a whole, but you're around people who are equally, if not more damaged than you. It is a community where people are trauma bonding with one another. It's a community where one person is more broken than the other person, and it's an entire hobby where everyone is just looking for that external gratification and ego hit from what they post and who they wind up dating and this and that. And it's just a bunch of deplorable human beings congregating in one sector of the earth that are all just sharing in each other's pain. And it's a very sexual environment. It's a very deviant environment. And it's an environment where you start to get into some weird things sexually. So you wind up going after women who no longer look like women, you know? And you go after these women that are competing. And in reality, that's not what a feminine human being is. So now you develop these weird, you know, kinks and quirks, which you look at, or we look at as a normality thing. And then sex becomes normal. And then what winds up happening is you wind up pushing that needle back every so often. So now you're having sex, and then you do something during sex, and you're disgusted with yourself because why would somebody let me do that to her? And then you wind up doing it again, and you're like, all right, now it's not as disgusting, and then you do it again and again and again. What?
I was going to say, because you build a tolerance.
That's what I'm saying.
So you start to build a tolerance over time with any addiction, substance, or, you know, engaging in an activity.
And it's that constant dopamine hit that I got. So it's like girls that like to be abused during physical, like during intercourse and stuff, that's not normal. That stems from trauma and pain. And like when you're allowing a man to do that to you, at first the man is kind of like, what? And then it becomes a normality, and then you crave that. And if you're not getting that now, that's the problem. That line in the sand is already crossed.
Right.
So that sex in that time was helping me escape from the pain that I was feeling when I was sitting with myself. And then when I wasn't having sex, what did I do? I'd go online and I'd look at pornography. Mm-hmm. So it was either me having sex with somebody or me looking at pornography. And my addiction went up to like 10 times a day. Wow. I wouldn't move from the computer. It was horrible. And I will say, being in the position that I'm in now, the men that I've been able to surround myself with as a life coach, the pornography addiction is such an unspoken problem for men. I don't think people realize
No.
How many men in this world suffer from that addiction, and it's so unspoken and it's ignored and people never bring it up.
And also sex with prostitutes.
That's yeah.
I know people who have been, and a bunch of people who were addicted to having sex with prostitutes. Even so, they would have girlfriends, and under, you know, another alias, they would be reaching out to prostitutes, and you know, even that is huge.
Exactly, and it's the act of just constantly engaging in this deplorable, negative, disgusting behavior, which at the time, you know, when you're watching what you're watching on porn, or you're engaging in, you know, 10 different partners a day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was a lot at one time. You know, I feel terrible for the roommate that I lived with at the time, because it was just like a revolving door.
You had a roommate?
Yeah.
Probably like, what's going on with this guy?
It was a
Is he going to be done today?
It was a revolving door, and like it got to the point where I'm like, yo.
I hope you had soundproof walls.
No. And we're like, so-and-so is coming over, and he's like, no, not tonight. But I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't respect him.
Oh my
gosh. And he couldn't understand that I had an actual I had an actual problem.
Right.
Like if I wasn't going to get it, I got angry. I got anxiety. I got depression. I got suicidal. I didn't want to sit with myself.
Right.
So the point that I'm making is that a lot of these addictions that we face, no matter what it is, regardless if it's adult content, regardless if it's steroids, regardless if it's sex or alcohol or drugs or gambling, in my opinion, because I am not a clinical psychologist, in my opinion, all it's meant to do is to give somebody a momentary lapse of dealing with the contortion of being themselves. It is just the ability to release themselves from the pain and the internal suffering that they're dealing with on a daily basis, for them to not want to look at themselves in the mirror and give themselves just the slightest bit of gratification in that moment. Because the times when I was with somebody, I didn't think about how much I hated myself.
Right.
The times where I turned my computer screen on, even though it was only 5 minutes, I didn't think
like, let's go.
I didn't think about how much I hated myself. But as soon as it ended, as soon as that screen closed, or as soon as somebody left my presence, I was right back to square one.
That's like as soon as I would wake up the next morning, it's just like everything hits you, right? So no, I agree. I think all of these things are used to refrain from, you know, an emotional response and really dive deep into why you feel the way that you feel. And you're running from the hurt and the pain and the suffering. And, you know, it's easier to have a scapegoat and to be able to put a Band-Aid over something than really address the issue. It's very hard to sit in your pain and really understand it. And I think for a lot of people, that's the main issue. No one wants to sit with it, and gets to a point where now you have this tolerance threshold that you build, and you keep needing more and more and more, to a point that you're just so deep in it now that this is why it's so hard to break. Because now to get that dopamine hit, you can't be just normal. You have to either really indulge in that drug or alcohol. You have to really indulge in that activity. So having sex 10 times a day, or watching pornography, or working 10, 15 hours a day as opposed to 6. So something that started so small has now become on such a large scale that like you can't even function without engaging in this activity, because it's overcome your whole entire life. And now how are you going to go to baseline? How are you going to go to living your everyday when your tolerance is so high, and you're either engaging in this behavior or ingesting something in your body that is making you feel a type of way? It is so difficult. But the main message for people to understand is, you know, so many people deal with addiction and so many people struggle, and it's not something to be ashamed of. And I know how hard it is to escape it, and I know how torturous it is in your mind to understand, you know, the detriment it's doing in your life on so many different forefronts, and still not being able to stop. And I think that that's the biggest issue with it, knowing how much you're hurting others and how much you're hurting yourself, and still engaging in, you know, that behavior. It's really depressing, and you're not alone. There's so many people who struggle with it on a daily basis. I mean, even myself. So,
I want to go on to something that you said, because one thing that people, I think, have something that bothers me, they call people with addictions selfish
and weak. Oh, I hate that.
I'm here to tell you, whoever listens to this, those are the strongest people you will ever meet. And the reason being is as follows. This is my own personal opinion. This doesn't come from fact. This just comes from how I've been able to heal myself and the people that I've spoken to in my life. Inside all of those addicts is a little child that is just screaming for help. And that is a child that survived 100% of that person's hardest days. Mm-hmm. That is a child that dealt with all of the pain and all of the trauma and all of the issues and all of the grief and all of the pain and all of the shame and all of the regret. And that child over the years developed an external shell, which is the adult that you see in front of you that now has this addiction. You're not dealing with an adult with an addiction. You're dealing with a child that is unhealed, that's broken, and that person has not cared for subconsciously. And I think calling anyone weak or selfish, you would never look at a child and call a child weak if that child's in pain. And that's what's happening to these adults. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to Madison. That's what happened to everyone else I know that became an addict in their older years, whatever that addiction was from. There's a child in them that just needs to be taken care of, that needs to be loved, that needs to be considered, that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be praised, and that needs, at the end of the day, somebody to be told that it's okay.
And someone to believe in them and know that they could, that made me tear. Someone to believe in them and know that they're able to get out of this and overcome this devastating situation that they've been in for years on end. And again, I think just to touch upon, if you're that person who's shaming someone who's in your life for addiction, I mean, seriously, shame on you, because you need to really educate yourself then about addiction. No one should ever in their life try to manipulate, degrade, or coerce a person to change. And if they don't, then, you're not going to be in their life, or, you call them negative names and all of these things, which I see constantly. You need to really educate yourself, because that is not something that you should be doing to a person who's struggling, because they are aware of what's going on and they hate themselves enough. Don't add to their baggage, please.
And that's the one thing that I kind of want to be able to steer this conversation into at the end is, Madison again said they hate themselves enough. And I think the quicker that we as a society assist people to sit with their suffering and to not run from it and to not ignore it and to get down to the base cause and to the root of the issues and to acknowledge that there's pain inside of them, you can only meet that with love.
Yes.
You can only meet that with self-compassion. You can
and patience.
And grace. You
Yes.
can only meet it with grace. And the sooner that you develop the ability to look at yourself and understand that you just need to love yourself at the end of the day, that is the quickest road to healing through everything.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I feel like I had a therapy session, but it's okay. I like that. I got everything out.
I only gave her a therapy session the other night for 55 minutes on the phone. Okay.
This is the second one. I need 2 times a week. It's okay. That's all right.
But I'm not charging, which is weird.
Therapists need therapists. So I'm just going to say that. But
is there anything else that you would want to give to
I
people?
think we really hit everything. What do you think?
I think one person will heal from this, and I think that that's our mission and that it's fulfilling.
Yeah.
I think one person's going to listen to this and take something away and look at themselves in a different light.
I hope. And just know, me and Ian are sitting before you who have dealt with and are dealing with these struggles as well. So you're not alone, and it's tough. but you will get there with persistency and determination and willpower. And, you know, don't be afraid to fall. So that's what I would say.
I love that.